Cary, North Carolina. If you've never been, picture this. A town where the grass looks like it was trimmed by a team of neurosurgeons using nail clippers. The mailboxes stand at military attention, and the air smells faintly of freshly laid mulch and unearned superiority. It's suburban paradise. Or, a dystopian nightmare, depending on how much you value your sanity. I had just closed on my dream home in the Whispering Pines subdivision. It was a mid-century split level with good bones, mature oak trees, and an exterior painted this really nice, calming shade of slate blue. Not neon blue, not Smurf blue. Slate, like a moody ocean on a cloudy day. I loved it. It gave the house character. But character, as I quickly learned, is a Class A felony in Whispering Pines. I was outside on a Tuesday afternoon, unpacking the last few boxes of garage stuff, minding my own business. The sun was shining. The birds were chirping. And then, the unmistakable sound of aggressive power walking echoed up my driveway. Scuff, scuff, scuff. I turned around, holding a box of tangled extension cords. Enter Brenda. Brenda was the president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I knew this immediately because she was wearing a visor that practically announced it, alongside a polo shirt tucked so tightly into her khaki shorts, I worried for her internal organs. She had the haircut of a woman who demands to speak to the regional manager, and the posture of an apex predator circling a wounded gazelle. In her left hand, she gripped a pink slip of paper. In her right, a clipboard. "Excuse me," she barked. She didn't ask. It was a command. "Hey there," I said, putting the box down and wiping my hands on my jeans. I know who you are," Brenda interrupted, adjusting her visor against the glare of the sun. "You're the new owner of Lot 42, and we have a problem." I blinked. A problem? I haven't even finished unpacking. Did I block the sidewalk with my moving truck? Brenda sighed. It was a long, dramatic, theatrical sigh. The kind of sigh a disappointed parent gives a toddler who just painted the dog with peanut butter. "Your house," she said, pointing a manicured acrylic-tipped finger at my beautiful slate blue siding. "It's disruptive." "Disruptive?" I repeated. "It's a house. It just sits there." "The color," she snapped, stepping closer, invading my personal space bubble. "It is entirely out of compliance with the Whispering Pines community aesthetic standards. We are a neutral-toned community. We project elegance. We project cohesion. That blue is an eyesore. It lowers property values just by existing." I looked at my house. Then, I looked at the house to the left, which was tan. Then I looked at the house to the right, which was light beige. Across the street? Eggshell. "It's slate," I offered, trying to keep things light. "It's barely blue. It's like a gray with a hint of personality." Brenda did not like the word personality. Her eye actually twitched. "I am officially issuing you a notice of violation," she declared, ripping the pink slip from her clipboard and practically shoving it into my chest. "You have exactly 30 days to repaint the primary exterior of this structure to a board-approved beige. If you fail to comply, you will be fined $100 a day, every day, until the violation is cured. If you rack up enough fines, we will place a lien on your property." She smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a bureaucratic dictator who had just flexed her tiny municipal muscles. 30 days, Brenda repeated. She did a crisp, about face and power-walked down the driveway, leaving me standing there holding a pink slip of paper and a burning sense of indignation. I looked down at the citation. Violation. Unauthorized primary exterior color. Remedy. Paint board-approved beige. See Appendix B. Did I yell? No. Did I chase her down the street to argue? Absolutely not. I went inside. I made a pot of incredibly strong coffee, and I sat down at my kitchen island with my laptop. If there is one thing you need to know about me, it's that I don't get mad. I get legal. You want to play the rules game, Brenda? Fine, let's play. But I'm going to read the rule book cover to cover, and I'm going to find the exact paragraph where you messed up. I logged into the HOA resident portal. It was a clunky, early 2000s nightmare of a website, but there it was, the Whispering Pines Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, the CC&Rs, the sacred texts, 142 pages of legalese. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to hunt. I scrolled past the rules about garbage can placement. Must be hidden behind a fence by 7:00 a.m. I skipped the section on acceptable lawn ornaments, no more than 2, neither exceeding 14 inches in height. I finally hit Article 4, Section 3, Exterior Aesthetics and Maintenance. I leaned in, tracing the words on the screen with my finger. Clause 3.1. The primary exterior color of all residential structures must be selected from the approved neutral palette. See Appendix B. Okay, fair enough. They had me there. The blue was not in Appendix B. Clause 3.2. Primary color is strictly defined as covering no less than 75% of the total exterior surface area of the structure's front-facing facade. I stopped. I read it again. Primary color is defined as covering no less than 75% of the total exterior surface area. My brain started turning. If the primary color, the board-approved beige, only has to cover 75% of the surface area, what happens to the other 25%? I frantically scrolled down, looking for restrictions on secondary colors. Clause 3.3. Accent colors are restricted to doors and shutters and must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Right. Doors and shutters. But what about the actual walls? What if the primary color is beige, covering exactly 75.1% of the house, and the remaining 24.9% is something else? Was there a rule against patterns, murals, geometric shapes? I searched the document for murals. 0 results. I searched for shapes. 0 results. I searched for secondary wall colors. 0 results. Brenda's little rulebook was so obsessed with defining the primary color that it completely forgot to regulate the remaining square footage. Now, if you know anything about North Carolina property law, you know about a little concept called the strict construction of restrictive covenants. It basically means that courts hate HOAs trying to invent rules that aren't clearly written down. If a rule is ambiguous, the law sides with the homeowner's free use of their land. If the contract doesn't explicitly and undeniably forbid a giant neon shape on the remaining 25% of my wall, it is 100% legal. I started laughing. Alone in my kitchen, just a deep, cynical, villainous chuckle. Brenda wanted board-approved beige? I would give her exactly what she asked for, to the absolute letter of the law. But I needed backup. I couldn't pull this off with a roller and a ladder from Home Depot. I needed precision. I needed an exterior contractor who didn't fear the wrath of Whispering Pines. The next morning, I started making calls. "Yeah, sorry, man," the first painter said over the phone. "Whispering Pines? No way. Last time I worked a job there, the HOA president measured my drop cloths with a yardstick. I don't need the headache." "Whispering Pines?" the second guy said. "I'm booked until 2028. He hung up before I could even explain the project. By the fifth call, I was losing hope. Then I dialed a number I found on a flyer stapled to a telephone pole near a hardware store. Mike's Custom Exteriors. No job too weird. Mike answered the phone on the third ring over the sound of a roaring circular saw. "Talk to me," he grunted. "I need my house painted in Cary," I said. "Whispering Pines." The saw shut off. A heavy sigh echoed through the receiver. "You know that neighborhood is run by a dictator with a clipboard, right?" "I do," I said. "Her name is Brenda. She cited me for having a blue house. She wants me to paint it beige." "So? Painted beige. What do you need me for?" "Because, Mike," I said, leaning back in my chair, "I only want you to paint 75.1% of the front wall beige." Silence on the line. "What about the rest of it?" Mike asked, his voice suddenly thick with suspicion. "The rest of it," I replied, "is going to be a perfect, mathematically precise circle. And I want that circle painted neon pink. Specifically, Pepto-Bismol, burn your retinas, glow-in-the-dark pink." Another long silence. Then a low, rumbling laugh. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Mike said. When Mike pulled up in a battered Ford F-150, he looked exactly like a guy who thrives on chaos. He was wearing steel-toed boots, paint-splattered cargo pants, and a baseball cap pulled low. He took one look at the house, took one look at me, and pulled a laser measuring tool out of his pocket. "Walk me through the math, kid," he said, firing a red laser dot at my front door. We stood in the driveway, me holding a printout of the CC&Rs, Mike holding a notepad. "All right," I said, pointing to the house. "Clause 3.2 says the primary color has to cover no less than 75% of the total exterior surface area of the front facade. If we dip below 75%, I get fined. If we stay above it, the beige is legally the primary color. The rules don't dictate what the remaining 25% can be, as long as it's not on the doors or shutters." Mike was sketching rapidly. "Okay, let's do the geometry. Your front facade is basically a massive rectangle with a triangle on top for the roofline." He spent the next hour measuring every square inch of the front wall. He measured the windows. He measured the door frame. He subtracted the negative space. He was a savant with a tape measure. "All right," Mike finally said, clicking his pen. "Total surface area of the front facade, minus the windows and the door, is exactly 1,200 square feet." I did the math in my head. "So 75% of that is 900 square feet." "Exactly," Mike nodded. "To be safe, we want the beige to cover 901 square feet. That leaves us with 299 square feet of open canvas." "How big of a circle is 299 square feet?" I asked. Mike grinned. It was a terrifying, beautiful grin. "Area of a circle is pi times the radius squared. For an area of 299 square feet, you're looking at a radius of about 9.75 feet. That means we can paint a solid neon pink polka dot right in the dead center of your house that is 19.5 feet across. A nearly 20-foot pink dot, right facing the street." "Can you do it?" I asked. "Can you make it perfect?" "I have CAD software in my truck," Mike said. "I can map the exact center point, mask off the circumference with laser precision, and roll it out. The beige will be exactly 75.1%. The dot will be exactly 24.9%. It will be mathematically bulletproof." "You're hired," I said. "When do we start?" "I'll get the beige on tomorrow," Mike said, packing up his tools. "Let the HOA think they won. Let Brenda see the beige. We hit the pink on Saturday morning at dawn. By the time they wake up, it'll be fully dry. The trap was set. Wednesday and Thursday were agonizing. Mike and his crew showed up and rolled on the board-approved beige. It was hideous. It stripped every ounce of personality from the house. It looked like a giant architectural saltine cracker. But I played the part perfectly. I sat on my porch, looking defeated. On Thursday afternoon, Brenda power walked by. She stopped at the end of my driveway, hands on her hips, taking in the beige monstrosity. I gave her a weak wave. She didn't wave back. She just smirked, made a check mark on her clipboard, and kept walking. She thought she had crushed my spirit. She thought I had fallen into line. She had no idea what was coming. Friday night, I barely slept. It felt like the night before Christmas, if Santa was a disgruntled contractor armed with high-gloss latex paint. At 5:30 a.m. on Saturday, the rumble of Mike's truck woke me up. I threw on a hoodie and ran outside. The air was crisp, the neighborhood completely silent. "Showtime," Mike whispered. He and his guy set up a massive tripod in the yard. They fired up a laser level that projected a blinding green beam onto the beige siding. Using the center point, they took a custom compass rig they'd built out of a string and a pencil and traced a flawless, massive circle spanning almost the entire height of the house. It covered the siding, wrapped neatly around a second-story window frame, and dropped down to hover just inches above the foundation. Then came the painter's tape. Miles of it. They masked off the perimeter with clinical precision. By 6:30 a.m., the sun was just starting to peek over the perfectly manicured trees. Mike popped the lid off a 5-gallon bucket. I gasped. I asked for neon pink, but this was radioactive. It was the color of a flamingo that had fallen into a vat of toxic waste. It was glorious. "Roll it," I said. They worked fast. The heavy nap rollers soaked up the pink paint and slapped it onto the beige siding. With every stroke, the sheer absurdity of what we were doing became more apparent. It was so bright it physically hurt to look at. By 8:00 a.m., the masking tape was peeled off. I stepped back to the curb and looked at my house. The primary exterior color was, undeniably, board-approved beige. It covered exactly 901 square feet of the front facade, and right in the middle, dominating the visual field, was a 19.5-foot, high-gloss, neon pink polka dot. It was a masterpiece. "I'm leaving," Mike said, tossing his rollers into the truck. "I don't want to be here when the screaming starts. I'll email you the invoice." "Mike, you're an artist," I said, shaking his hand. He tipped his cap, threw the truck into gear, and vanished down the street just as the neighborhood started to wake up. I went into the garage, pulled out an aluminum lawn chair, set it right in the middle of the driveway, and cracked open a can of sparkling water. I sat down, crossed my legs, and waited. It didn't take long. At 8:15 a.m., Mrs. Gable from 3 houses down walked out to grab her newspaper. She picked it up, turned around, and froze. Her jaw literally dropped. She stared at my house for a solid 30 seconds, dropped the paper on the sidewalk, and scurried back inside. At 8:30 a.m., a guy walking a golden retriever stopped in front of my lawn. The dog barked at the house, literally barked at the pink dot. It was that aggressive. At 8:45 a.m., a Prius driving down the street slowed to an absolute crawl. The driver pressed his phone against the glass, snapping photos. The murmurs were starting. The neighborhood text chains were undoubtedly blowing up. I could feel the disturbance in the HOA force. And then, at 9:02 a.m., the storm arrived. I heard her before I saw her. A high-pitched, vibrating sound of pure, unadulterated fury. "What in the name of all that is holy have you done?" Brenda came sprinting, actually sprinting around the corner. She wasn't power walking. She was running. Her visor was slightly askew. Her face was the color of a ripe pomegranate. She skidded to a halt at the edge of my driveway, pointing a trembling finger at the neon pink monolith. "Morning, Brenda," I chirped, taking a sip of my sparkling water. "Beautiful Saturday, isn't it?" "Are you insane?" she shrieked, her voice echoing off the identical houses around us. "What is that? What is that on your house?" "It's a statement piece," I said calmly. "I call it the burden of compliance." "It is a violation," she screamed, stomping her foot. "It is vandalism. You have defaced community property. I will fine you into bankruptcy. I will take your house." "Actually, Brenda," I said, standing up and pulling my folded copy of the CC&Rs out of my back pocket. "If you check Article 4, Section 3.2, you'll see that the primary exterior color must be board-approved beige and must cover no less than 75% of the surface area. I had an independent contractor measure the facade. The beige covers exactly 75.1%. I am in full compliance with the primary color mandate." Brenda stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating goldfish. The rest of it," she sputtered. "The pink! You can't have a giant pink dot." "Show me where it says that," I challenged, holding out the rule book. "Show me the clause that bans geometric shapes or regulates the remaining 24.9% of the wall space. I read the whole thing, Brenda. You restricted accent colors on doors and shutters. You forgot to restrict the siding." "That is a loophole," she yelled, her volume drawing several neighbors out onto their lawns. "That is the law," I corrected, smiling. "Strict construction of restrictive covenants. Ambiguities fall in favor of the homeowner." Brenda's eyes darted wildly around the street. She was losing her audience. The neighbors were whispering, and a few of them were definitely trying to hide their smiles. Brenda realized she was out of her depth in a debate about contract law. So she went for the nuclear option. She pulled her cell phone out of her pocket with violently shaking hands. "I am calling the police," she declared. "This is malicious destruction of property." "It's my property," I pointed out. "It's community aesthetic," she fired back, dialing 911. "Yes, hello? Police? I need an officer dispatched to Whispering Pines immediately. Yes, it's an emergency. Someone has vandalized a house. Yes, it's horrific. Hurry!" She hung up and glared at me. "You are going to jail." "Can I get you a chair?" I asked. "It might take them a minute." She paced. I sat back down. 15 minutes later, a Cary Police Department cruiser rolled slowly down the street. It pulled to a stop in front of my house, the tires crunching against the curb. 2 officers stepped out. They were both tall, serious-looking guys, hands resting casually near their duty belts, scanning for a threat, a weapon, a crime scene. Then they looked up. They saw the 19.5-foot neon pink polka dot. The officer on the left stopped dead in his tracks. He took off his sunglasses. He rubbed his eyes. He put his sunglasses back on. I saw his shoulders start to shake. He was trying desperately to hold in a laugh. The officer on the right cleared his throat aggressively, trying to maintain his professional composure. Brenda sprinted over to them. "Officers! Thank God! Look at this! Look at what this maniac did to our neighborhood!" The lead officer approached me. I stood up, hands out of my pockets. "Morning, officers," I said. "Sir?" the officer said, his voice completely deadpan, but his eyes were shining with amusement. "Did you do this?" "I hired a professional contractor to do it, yes," I said. "And do you own this property?" "Closed on it 3 weeks ago. My name is on the deed." The officer turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, you called 911 to report vandalism." "It is vandalism," Brenda insisted, pointing wildly. "It's destroying our property values. It violates the HOA code. Arrest him. Make him paint it over." The second officer finally broke. He let out a loud snort, turned around, and pretended to inspect the squad car's tires to hide his face. The lead officer sighed, adjusting his utility belt. "Ma'am, it is not illegal to paint your own house pink. Or part of it pink. This is a civil matter between you, the homeowner, and your HOA. There is no crime here." "But it's too bright," she argued. "We don't enforce brightness, ma'am," the officer said, clearly eager to get out of there before he lost his composure entirely. "If he starts pointing strobe lights at airplanes, call the FAA. Otherwise, have a good day." The officer looked at me. "Nice circle, by the way. Very even." "Thanks," I said. "Used a laser level." They got back in their cruiser and drove away. Brenda was left standing on the sidewalk, completely defeated by the boys in blue. She looked at me. I raised my sparkling water in a silent toast. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I am calling an emergency board meeting. We are going to amend the bylaws. We are going to fine you. We will take everything you have." "I look forward to the invite," I said. She turned and marched away, her posture rigid, her pride shattered by a giant, neon-pink loophole. As soon as she was out of sight, I pulled out my phone and started recording a video. I mean, I literally didn't have to wait long for the other shoe to drop. Exactly 48 hours after the Cary Police Department practically laughed Brenda off my front lawn, I found it taped to my door. Not just taped, honestly. It was adhered with what looked like an entire roll of industrial packing tape, as if Brenda was afraid the wind might blow away her ultimate weapon. It was a formal summons to an emergency disciplinary hearing of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association Board of Directors. The venue? The community center rec room. The time? Tuesday evening, 7:00 p.m. Sharp. The charge? Gross and intentional violation of community aesthetic standards resulting in a hostile visual environment. I guess a pink circle is a hostile visual environment now. Like I didn't realize geometry could commit assault. But here we are. Tuesday rolled around, and I made sure to prepare. I didn't just bring the CC&Rs. I brought a literal rolling whiteboard that I borrowed from a buddy who teaches middle school math. I strapped it into the back of my SUV, grabbed a pack of fresh, dry erase markers, my laser pointer, and a manila folder thick with printed case law. I walked into the community center rec room at exactly 6:58 p.m. The atmosphere in that room was honestly thicker than a bowl of cold oatmeal. You know the vibe. Fluorescent lights humming aggressively overhead, the faint smell of chlorine from the community pool next door, and a folding table set up at the front of the room like a tribunal bench. Sitting behind the table was the Supreme Council. In the center, naturally, was Brenda. She was wearing a blazer this time, clearly trying to project absolute authority. To her right was Kevin, the vice president, a guy who looked like his entire personality was based on golf handicaps and yelling at referees at youth soccer games. To her left was Martha, the secretary, who looked absolutely terrified and was clutching a spiral notebook like it was a life preserver. And sitting slightly off to the side, looking bored out of his mind and checking his watch, was a guy in a cheap suit. I instantly clocked him as the HOA's retained attorney. Let's call him Gary. Gary looked like he billed by the hour, and realized a long time ago that HOAs are just adult middle school drama. A few of the neighborhood busybodies were sitting in the folding chairs set up for the audience, whispering fiercely to each other as I rolled my whiteboard down the center aisle. The squeaking of the rubber wheels on the linoleum floor echoed through the dead, silent room. I parked the whiteboard right in front of the tribunal table, locked the wheels, and took a seat in the front row. "Mr. Ibrahim," Brenda began, her voice dripping with venom. She banged a small wooden gavel. She actually brought a gavel on the plastic folding table. "This emergency hearing is now in session. You have been summoned here because you have willfully and maliciously defaced a property within the jurisdiction of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. I mean, defaced is a strong word, Brenda, I said, leaning back in my metal folding chair and crossing my arms. I'd call it an upgrade. Kevin leaned forward, his face already turning a mottled shade of red. Listen here, pal. We don't think this is a joke. That monstrosity on your house is tanking our property values as we speak. We are prepared to levy maximum daily fines, place a lien on your mortgage, and initiate foreclosure proceedings if you don't paint over that glowing pink target by tomorrow morning. Are we on the record? I asked, looking at Martha. Martha jumped slightly, then nodded, her pen hovering over her notebook. Yes, I'm taking minutes. Great, I said, standing up. Please note for the record that the vice president just threatened me with a hostile property takeover over a paint color that is completely legal under the current bylaws. Gary, as the legal counsel here, I assume you're tracking the liability the board is exposing itself to right now? Gary stopped checking his watch and looked up at me, his eyes narrowing. The board has the right to enforce the CC&Rs, sir. Article 4, Section 3 requires a neutral primary color. Exactly, Brenda shouted, slamming her hand on the table. Board-approved beige, not radioactive bubblegum. I literally agree with you, I said calmly. I walked over to my whiteboard, uncapped a black marker, and drew a massive rectangle. Let's do some math, shall we? Because I love math, and I guess the board doesn't. I tapped the whiteboard with the marker. This represents the front facade of my house. According to Clause 3.2 of your own rulebook, the primary exterior color must be selected from the approved palette, and it is strictly defined, strictly, Gary, you know what that word means in contract law, as covering no less than 75% of the total exterior surface area. I started writing the numbers on the board in big block letters. The total surface area of my front facade, excluding the doors and windows which are exempt under Clause 3.3, is exactly 1,200 square feet. My contractor and I measured it using laser surveying equipment. It is documented, verified, and I have the key AD files if Gary wants to subpoena them. I looked at the board members. Brenda was glaring. Kevin was crossing his arms. Martha was furiously scribbling numbers. 75% of 1,200 square feet is 900 square feet, I continued, writing the equation on the board. Therefore, to comply with the primary color mandate, I am legally required to have at least 900 square feet of board-approved beige on my house. The remaining 25%, or 300 square feet, is entirely unregulated by your CC&Rs, provided it is not an accent color applied to a door or shutter. Which it is not. It is applied to the siding. I capped the black marker, picked up a red one, and drew a large circle inside the rectangle. The board-approved beige on my house currently covers exactly 901.2 square feet. It is the primary color. It meets the 75% threshold. The neon pink polka dot, which has a radius of roughly 9.75 feet, covers exactly 298.8 square feet. It constitutes exactly 24.9% of the surface area. I turned around and looked directly at Brenda. My house is legally, mathematically, and undeniably beige, Brenda. The pink dot is just a 24.9% unregulated anomaly. The room was dead silent I could hear the hum of the vending machine in the hallway. That is absurd, Kevin sputtered, slamming his fist on the table. It's a loophole! You can't just paint a giant pink dot on your house and claim it's beige. Look at it. Kevin, I literally don't care what you think it looks like, I replied smoothly. I care about what the contract says, and the contract has a massive, glowing pink hole in it. It's a nuisance! Brenda shrieked, grasping at straws. Clause 5.1, no homeowner shall create a visual or auditory nuisance. A paint color is not a legal nuisance in the state of North Carolina, I shot back, walking over to my manila folder. I pulled out a stack of paper-clipped documents and dropped them onto the folding table right in front of Gary. Gary, I said, tapping the stack, please review JT, Hobby and Son, Inco. V. Family Homes of Wake County, Inc. It's a landmark North Carolina Supreme Court case. It establishes the doctrine of the strict construction of restrictive covenants. Let me summarize it for the board, since I know Brenda didn't go to law school. I paced back and forth in front of the table, making sure my voice carried to the neighbors sitting in the back. The Supreme Court of this state has ruled repeatedly that restrictive covenants, like HOA bylaws, are in derogation of the common law right to the free use of land. That means courts hate them. They tolerate them, but they hate them. Therefore, any ambiguity, loophole, any lack of clarity in an HOA rulebook must, and I mean literally must, be resolved in favor of the homeowner. You cannot invent rules that aren't clearly explicitly written down. I stopped and pointed at the board. Your rulebook forgot to ban geometric shapes on the remaining 25% of the wall. Because you didn't explicitly forbid it. You implicitly allowed it. If you try to fine me, I will refuse to pay. If you try to put a lien on my house, I will sue the HOA for slander of title. And if you continue to harass me, Brenda, I will pierce the corporate veil of this little board and sue you and Kevin personally for tortious interference with my property rights. I will drag you into a deposition. I will audit your emails, and I will make your lives a living legal hell over a pink polka dot. I let the silence hang in the air for a long, agonizing moment. Gary, the lawyer, slowly picked up the printout of the Supreme Court case. He flipped through the first 2 pages. He read the highlighted section. Then he let out a long, heavy sigh. He leaned over and whispered into Brenda's ear. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see the exact moment Brenda's soul left her body. Her face went from pomegranate red to a pale, sickly white. She gripped her gavel so hard her knuckles turned translucent. Kevin leaned in to listen to Gary. Kevin's jaw dropped. He looked at Gary, then looked at me, then looked back at Gary. He's right, Gary said out loud, his voice flat. He didn't even care who heard him. The covenant restricts the primary color. It fails to restrict secondary wall colors or patterns. Under strict construction, enforcing a fine here would be a breach of fiduciary duty by the board, as it would inevitably lead to a lawsuit the HOA would absolutely lose, draining the community's legal reserve fund. Gary closed his briefcase. My professional advice to the board is to dismiss the violation immediately. Brenda looked like she was going to cry, or vomit, or possibly both. She looked at the small crowd of neighbors, who were now openly whispering and snickering. She had been humiliated in her own court. She had been defeated by a tape measure and a basic understanding of surface area. She picked up her little wooden gavel. Her hand was shaking. The violation, she choked out, her voice barely a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. The violation against Lot 42 is dismissed. Bang. She hit the table with the gavel. It was the weakest, saddest little tap I had ever heard. Meeting adjourned, she mumbled, immediately standing up and fleeing toward the back exit of the rec room, leaving Kevin and Martha sitting there in stunned silence. I capped my dry erase marker, folded up my whiteboard, and rolled it out of the community center, whistling a happy little tune the entire way to my car. Honestly, the aftermath was even better than the hearing itself. You'd think living with a 20-foot aggressively neon pink polka dot on the front of your house would get annoying, but I guess it just became a badge of honor. It became a local landmark almost overnight. Delivery drivers absolutely loved it. I never had a package delivered to the wrong address again. I'd just put in the delivery instructions. Look for the house with the giant radioactive pink dot. If you hit a beige house without one, you've gone too far. My Uber drivers would pull up laughing. Even the mailman started leaving little smiley faces on my letters. The neighborhood kids started using it as a waypoint for their bike races. Okay, race from the stop sign to the pink dot house. And the best part? Brenda had to walk past it every single day on her morning power walk. Every morning I'd sit on my porch with my coffee, and I'd watch her march down the sidewalk. Whenever she got to my property line, she would physically turn her head in the opposite direction, refusing to look at it. Her neck muscles must have been so strained, but she never said another word to me. The clipboard was put away. The pink violation slips magically stopped appearing on people's doors. The reign of terror at Whispering Pines was effectively over, broken by the sheer, unyielding power of malicious compliance. I did eventually hear, through the neighborhood grapevine, that the HOA board spent $5,000 in legal fees trying to draft an emergency amendment to the CC&Rs to ban geometric shapes and mandate that 100% of the house be beige. But to pass an amendment, they needed a 2/3 majority vote from all the homeowners. And after everyone saw Brenda get legally body-slammed in the rec room, the homeowners universally voted it down just to spite her. The pink dot stayed. It is still there today. A permanent high-gloss monument to sticking it to the man. I mean, this is exactly why I do what I do. People like Brenda rely on intimidation. They rely on the fact that most people are too busy, too tired, or too scared to actually read the fine print. They bank on you just caving in and buying the beige paint because it's easier than fighting. But the moment you strip away the bluster and actually look at the math, you realize these petty tyrants have absolutely no real power. They are just bullies hiding behind poorly drafted contracts, and a poorly drafted contract is just a playground if you know how to read it. So the next time your local dictator comes knocking with a clipboard and a list of demands, don't get mad. Don't yell. Just smile, ask for a copy of the bylaws, and go buy a calculator. You'd be amazed at what you can get away with when you follow the rules exactly as they are written. And that, my friends, is why you always read the fine print. Don't get mad. Get compliant.